If you ever see a red line on a hospital floor, don't step over it. They say it's just paint. But what if I told you it's not? Hey, welcome back. How have you been sleeping lately? Still waking up at 3:12 a.m. with no reason? Still feeling like someone's following you down empty halls? You're not alone, and maybe that's the problem. In this episode, we're diving deep into hospital walls that never forget. 8 true, scary hospital horror stories. These aren't stories pulled from some fiction forum. These are whispered tales passed between tired nurses, curious interns, and night shift staff who've seen too much and can't unsee it. From pediatric wings locked since the 80s to cries of babies that were never born to doctors who never aged, and rules that should never be broken. These stories come from real places, real hospitals across the United States, and they carry something far heavier than just fear. They carry memory. So whether you're listening on your commute, hiding under the blanket, or working your own night shift, stay close. Because in the world of hospital horror, the scariest things aren't the screams you hear, but the silences that answer back. Now, let's begin. Story 1. The Locked Children's Ward. I had only been at Bangor Medical Center for 3 weeks when I first heard about the 6th floor. It was always mentioned in passing half, whispered over lukewarm coffee, or during long shifts that bled into dawn. Nobody outright said it was haunted. They just said it was closed. Shut down in 1987 after a fire that never made the papers. Pediatric wing. No survivors, apparently. That's all they'd say before changing the subject. But curiosity is a dangerous thing, especially for someone like me, fresh out of nursing school, wide-eyed and eager to prove myself. My name's Cora. I was assigned to pediatric 2nd floor of the new ward, as everyone still called it, even though it had been operating for over 30 years. The 6th floor was just a memory, a place they said didn't matter anymore, but it did. I knew it did the night I stayed behind to finish notes past 2 a.m. The hospital had settled into that eerie kind of silence where even the sound of your pen feels too loud. That's when I heard it. A lullaby. Soft, distant, drifting down the stairwell like a thread pulling at something inside me. I froze, listened. The song was Old Hush Little Baby, but slower, almost broken. I told myself it was a phone ringtone, maybe a nurse's white noise app, but no one was around, and it was coming from above. I don't know what made me go. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe something deeper. I climbed the stairwell, each step colder than the last. When I reached the 6th floor landing, I found the door slightly ajar. Not locked, not chained, just waiting. I pushed it open, flashlight in hand. The beam caught dust hanging like fog. The hallway was intact, but untouched paint peeling linoleum warped windows long boarded up. Room numbers still intact. 601. 602, 603, and then toys. A red ball rolled out from under a door. A xylophone missing 2 keys sat in the hallway as if someone had just played it. My mouth went dry. I should have turned back. I didn't. One door was wide open. 608. Inside the walls were stained with time, and on the far side a crib stood with metal bars half bent. And above it, scrawled on the wall in faded crayon, were the words, "She won't stop crying." Then I heard it. The cry. Not a baby's wail, but a sharp, breathless sob like a child hiding in a closet. It was coming from behind the curtain. I raised the flashlight. The beam flickered. I stepped closer, calling out softly, "Are you okay?" No response. The crying stopped. The silence returned heavier this time. I pulled the curtain back and there was nothing, just an empty corner. And then a whisper, right at my ear, "Don't play here." I stumbled back, dropping the flashlight. The beam spun wildly across the floor before landing on small, child-sized handprints smeared on the inside of the window. I ran. I didn't stop until I was back on the second floor, heart slamming against my ribs, lungs full of ice. I didn't tell anyone. Who would believe me? A rookie nurse chasing ghosts in an abandoned wing. But things changed after that. I began hearing the lullaby more often, sometimes faintly from the vents, other times echoing through the stairwell. Toys would appear in the break room. A jack-in-the-box left on the counter. A child's bracelet on my clipboard. One night, a patient on the second floor, a little boy post-appendectomy, woke up screaming. He said there was a girl in his room asking if he wanted to play. No one else saw her. I started asking questions, quietly. One janitor, older, near retirement, told me the 6th floor wasn't shut down because of a fire. It was closed because children started dying, one after another. Fevers, seizures, nightmares so bad they'd stop breathing in their sleep. And when staff tried to transfer them off the floor, it followed, whatever it was. So they locked it, poured concrete into some rooms, but not all. Some doors still open, he said, if they like you. I stopped going near the stairwell, but the floor never left me. Sometimes late at night I'd see shadows of children in hallway mirrors. Other times I'd find crayon drawings in my locker. One even had my name on it. Then came the night the lullaby played over the intercom. Just for a few seconds. Just that slow broken hush, little baby echoing through the hospital at 3:12 a.m. No one could explain it. Tech said the system glitched, but every nurse who had been there long enough knew. We all looked up at the ceiling. No one said a word. They transferred me to another wing after that. I never asked why. Maybe someone was watching out for me, or maybe the 6th floor was done with me. I still dream about it, that hallway, that whisper. Don't play here. It wasn't a warning. It was a rule. One the hospital had tried to bury, but some memories don't die. They wait. They hum lullabies into the vents. They leave toys behind, and sometimes they find someone curious enough to open a door. I guess what I'm saying is if you ever work a night shift and you hear a song no one should be singing, don't follow it. Don't listen too closely. And whatever you do, don't go upstairs. We've all heard the phrase, curiosity killed the cat. But in a hospital, curiosity does more than kill it. Opens doors that were never meant to be found. And for one intern, what he discovered behind that door never truly let him go. Story 2, The Intern Who Got Too Curious. My name is Tyrese Morgan, and I was an intern at Cook County Hospital in Chicago the summer of 2011. It was supposed to be a chance to impress, to finally move beyond textbooks and touch real medicine with real stakes. But Cook County had a reputation, not just for the trauma cases or the overworked staff or the endless understaffing. It had stories, old ones, about the East Annex, a part of the hospital that had been closed since the early 90s after a structural fire. It wasn't on any map they gave us, but you could still find it on old blueprints in the basement archives. They said the fire had gutted a surgical wing and that it was cheaper to seal it off than rebuild. Most people didn't think about it, but I did, especially after I started noticing the door at the end of Corridor C. It didn't match the others. Heavy rusted, no badge reader, just a mechanical lock. And every now and then when I was charting late at night, I'd see someone standing in front of it, never going in, just staring at it. One night I asked a senior resident what was behind it. He just said, "Don't go looking where they've stopped asking questions." I laughed, thinking it was a joke. He didn't. So I got curious, and that's when it started. First came the sounds, scraping low metallic hums like an old machine trying to breathe again. I told myself it was just the air ducts, maybe vibration from the lower mechanical floors. Then came the lights, only in that section, flickering in patterns too steady to be random. I began checking the security monitors. One night around 2:30 a.m., I caught a figure standing inside the East Annex hallway, a man in a surgical gown facing the wall, unmoving. The timestamp blinked once, then the feed cut to static. I reported it. Maintenance said the camera was disconnected years ago, but I saw what I saw, so I planned it. My night shift was quiet, the attending distracted nurses, too tired to notice one intern slipping away. I used a borrowed key from environmental services. It didn't match the door, but with enough pressure it opened, and behind it dust darkness, and the feeling that the hallway was waiting for me. The air inside was heavier. Not stale, but thick, as if carrying a weight of its own. Equipment lay strewn along the walls, rusted IV poles, gurneys with wheels long melted into the linoleum. Room placards still read, OR6 Pre-Op 2, Scrub Station B. But there was no sound, no hum of electricity, only the thump of my heartbeat in my ears. I stepped into the main OR flashlight cutting through the dim. At first it looked abandoned, just as expected, until I saw the instruments. They were clean, laid out. Surgical scissors, scalpels, clamps, all arranged like a procedure was minutes from starting. And then I noticed the blood, a small smear on the edge of the stainless steel tray. Still wet. I wasn't alone. The surgical lamp above flickered to life. No power, no hum, just blinding white light. And under that light stood a figure in green scrubs, back turned, arms still. I froze. The figure raised one hand slowly, then turned not with a face, but a mask. A surgical mask, caked in something dark. The eyes behind it didn't blink. I stepped back, but the door behind me had vanished. The hallway was gone. I was in the OR, but the OR was nowhere. The walls closed in with every breath. My flashlight died. Only the surgical lamp remained. I don't remember how I got out, only that I woke up on a gurney in the ER with nurses saying I'd been found unconscious near Corridor C. My badge was missing. My shoes were soaked, and my fingernails were chipped as if I'd been clawing at something. They said I must have fainted. Maybe a drop in blood sugar. Maybe stress. But in my locker that night, someone had placed a single item. A surgical mask. The same kind I'd seen. Still damp, still warm. I didn't report it. I didn't ask. The next day, the door at the end of Corridor C was bricked over. I never saw it again, and no one ever mentioned it. I've moved on since then, finished residency, joined a quieter hospital. But every so often I smell antiseptic and burnt plastic when no one else does. And I remember that OR, the one they said didn't exist, the one I walked into because I couldn't let the question go. I suppose there's a lesson in that. Not all answers lead to understanding. Sometimes they lead to places that were meant to be forgotten. If you're ever walking hospital halls late at night and you feel drawn to a door no one talks about, don't open it. Not every wing was closed for budget reasons. Some were closed to keep something in, or someone out. Some things hide behind locked doors, others hide in plain sight. In this next story, a code blue is called in the middle of the night, but the room it comes from doesn't exist. Or at least it shouldn't. Story 3. Code blue. In room that doesn't exist. My name is Adrian Long. I've been a nurse for almost 13 years now, and I've seen enough to know that hospitals breathe. They pulse. Not with blood or air, but with memory, some kind, some sharp, and a few that settle into the corners like shadows too patient to leave. I used to work the night shift at Methodist Hospital in Houston, ICU. It was the kind of unit where hours bled into each other and you learned to read the beeping monitors the way most people read weather patterns. Stable, dangerous, dying. But there was one night that still doesn't fit into any pattern. It was early April, not quite spring, the kind of night where the air outside feels heavy even indoors. We were short-staffed like always and running on caffeine and protocols. Around 3:12 a.m., the hospital intercom crackled to life. Code blue, room 217B. There was a beat of silence, then every head at the nurses' station turned toward the board. I remember it clearly because we all knew that room didn't exist. There was no 27 Sanoine B. There was 27 Sanlis A, a post-op recovery bay, and 218 a palliative care suite. But no B. Still, procedure was procedure. We moved. I followed behind our charge nurse Monica and a respiratory tech named Lyle. As we turned the corner toward 217, the hallway seemed off. The light flickered faintly like a fluorescent strobe just before burnout. And there between the real rooms stood a door I had never seen before. It was slightly ajar. No plaque, no barcode, just a door that had no reason to be there. Monica reached for the handle but paused. The air had changed, thickened, like something had filled it that shouldn't be named. She looked at me. I nodded. Together we pushed it open. Inside was a single bed, dim light from an overhead bulb and a monitor blinking faintly in the corner. On the bed was a man, mid-70s maybe. His eyes were wide open, mouth slack skin pale with a blue tinge. Flatline. We checked for a pulse. Nothing. Lyle began compressions. I started charting the time. Monica called it in. It was a textbook code, except no one knew who the patient was. There was no wristband, no name on the chart, no ID in the room. The vitals monitor had no brand, just a blinking green line that faded when the compression stopped. After 15 minutes, we called time of death. 3:27 a.m. The room fell quiet. We stood there, catching our breath, confusion flickering between us. Then Monica stepped toward the door to call security, and it was gone. The door, the hallway, the exit. It was as if we had stepped out of time, and now it had stepped away from us. The light above us pulsed, once then shut off. Total darkness. Lyle fumbled for his flashlight. I turned mine on. The room was empty. No bed, no man, just dust, cobwebs, four walls, and silence. My notes on the clipboard were still there, time of death. Vitals, meds. But the page had no heading, no patient name, no initials, nothing. We found our way back to the ICU 20 minutes later, though it should have taken 3. The hallway we exited into was the opposite side of the building. The security log showed no door open near 217 that night. The intercom system had no record of a code blue at all. But when Monica opened the break room fridge the next morning, there was a cup of Jell-O inside lime green labeled 217B. None of us spoke. None of us reported it. In a hospital, there are things you treat and things you learn to let settle. We chose silence. Weeks passed. But 3:12 a.m. kept coming back. Always the same. A whisper on the intercom no one else heard. A flicker of a door between rooms that didn't belong, and always the sensation that someone was waiting. One night a float nurse asked if there had ever been a room 217B. I told her no. She laughed and said that was strange because her patient claimed he used to visit his father there before the fire. Fire? I asked. She shrugged. Said the patient was old, confused, that the ICU wing had been remodeled after something years ago. I looked it up. There had been a fire. In 1978, a man died in room 217B. Equipment malfunction. They closed the sub-wing after that. No record since. I transferred to another hospital a month later. Not because of what happened, but because I started dreaming in green. Lime green. Jell-O green. Walls painted that color. Machines blinking in a steady code I couldn't decipher. And always a voice calling out a room number that shouldn't exist. I still work nights. Different place. Different rules. But I've learned something I carry with me always. When a door appears that shouldn't be there, don't go through it. And when a code comes in from nowhere, sometimes it's not a call for help. Sometimes it's a memory trying to replay itself, hoping someone listens this time. If you ever hear a room number that no one else recognizes, don't ask questions. Just take a breath, step back. And remember, not all ghosts wear hospital gowns. Some carry clipboards. Some still call codes. Not every haunting walks or speaks. Some simply whisper. And in the cold silence of a hospital morgue, one man began to hear names of the dead before they even arrived. Story 4, The Morgue Whisperer. My name is Luis DeMarco. I worked nights at Bellevue Hospital's morgue for 9 years before I ever told anyone what happened, and even now I'm not sure it matters. Most people don't like talking about the morgue. Too cold, too quiet, too close to the truth we all try to ignore. But I didn't mind it. It suited me. The silence, the predictability, the paperwork. Bodies don't argue. They don't yell. They just arrive and you do what needs to be done. But there was one part of the job no one trained me for: the whispering. It started subtly. A low voice, like someone standing just behind you in a quiet room. At first I chalked it up to the refrigeration compressors kicking in, or maybe the hum of old copper pipes. Bellevue's a historic place after all. It creaks. But then the voices started saying names, first names, softly, barely audible like wind through teeth, and always before someone arrived. I'd be finishing a shift locking down paperwork when I'd hear it. Emily, or Frank, or Michael. A whisper floating out of nowhere. 12, maybe 16 hours later, the body would come in, and the toe tag would match. The first few times I didn't connect it. Coincidence, maybe. We saw hundreds of names a year, and the brain wants patterns. But after the 7th or 8th time, I couldn't pretend anymore. The whispers were real. They were warning me, calling me. I tried recording them once, left my phone on the table, hit record, stepped away. When I played it back, all I heard was static and my own voice humming a tune I didn't remember knowing. That was the first night I saw the figure. Not clearly, just movement. A blur in the reflection of the freezer door, but it moved against the room. It wasn't me. It wasn't a trick of the eye. And when I turned, there was nothing. Still, the whispers came. Sometimes days before, sometimes just hours, but always right. Every name, every time. I started writing them down. Notebook hidden in my locker. A private list of deaths yet to arrive. I thought maybe I could warn someone or prepare the staff. But what would I say? I heard a voice last night. Better call the family. No one would believe me. So I kept it quiet. Until one night the voice said my name. Luis. Just once. Just that. I froze, waited, but no one came. No body, no call, nothing. The rest of the shift passed in a blur of nerves and silence. I barely breathed. When I got home, I didn't sleep. Just sat in the shower water running cold, trying to remember if I'd missed a sign. But I was still here, alive, breathing. The next night it came again. Luis, louder, closer, like it was just behind the drawer where I kept the scalpels. I turned so fast I slipped on the tile, cut my hand on the sink. Nothing there, but I could feel it now. The pressure in the room, like air before a storm. Charged, ready. I quit 2 days later. Walked out and never came back. Told my supervisor I had family issues. Told myself I'd never go near a morgue again. But the voices didn't stop. They followed me. Into my dreams, into the quiet hours of the night when the fridge hums and the walls settle. I'd hear them whisper new names, ones I didn't recognize. I stopped reading obituaries. I stopped watching the news. I didn't want to know if they came true. And then last week I was walking past a clinic in Queens when I heard it again. Not a name, not a whisper, just breathing. Close, heavy, like someone exhaling through my own throat. I turned and saw the door to the basement open. Just a crack, and behind it cold. The kind that doesn't touch your skin. It moves through your ribs. I didn't go down, I walked, faster than I needed to. I haven't slept well since, and I know this sounds insane. Believe me, I do. But here's what I've come to understand. Some places like Bellevue don't just hold bodies. They hold memory, echoes, residue. And if you listen closely, they talk. Not in words we recognize, but in the rhythm of names yet to be spoken. I don't know why it chose me. Maybe I was quiet enough to hear. Maybe the dead need someone who doesn't look away. But if you ever find yourself working alone in a morgue and you hear your own name whispered from behind the drawer, don't ignore it. Don't pretend it was nothing. And whatever you do, don't answer. Because once you do, it might not stop calling. The living pass on. The dead remain. But what if time doesn't move at all? What if one shift just never ends? Our next story isn't about ghosts. It's about being trapped in a place in a loop in a moment that refuses to let go. Story 5. The shift that never ended. I don't remember when the shift started. Not exactly. I remember the coffee stale lukewarm brewed by a tech who never spoke more than 3 words. I remember the pager vibrating against my hip. I remember the fluorescent lights flickering overhead, always just slightly too loud. But the clock, that part's missing. It was supposed to be a 12-hour overnight. I had just transferred to Boise, excited for a change of pace, something slower than the chaos of Los Angeles. But St. Luke's, despite its calm exterior, carried a certain weight. Something I didn't recognize until it was far too late. My name is Sasha. I'm a nurse, and I can't tell you how long that night lasted. At first, it was just a feeling, a dragging sensation like time had thickened. I'd glance at the wall clock and see the same minute twice. Medications that should have taken an hour to kick in worked instantly. Others didn't work at all. The hallways felt longer than usual. I walked the same stretch 3 times and still ended up at the wrong room. My patients weren't complaining. They were asleep. All of them. Too quiet. No snoring. No coughing. No monitors beeping in protest. Just silence that spread like fog. I checked my phone. No signal. The timestamp wouldn't refresh. 12:47 a.m. Stuck. I asked another nurse, Maria, how much longer until shift change. She blinked like she hadn't heard me, then smiled and said soon, before turning down a hallway that didn't exist on the map. I followed her, only there was no one there. Just dim lights and doors without numbers. That was the first time I felt afraid. I tried going to the nurse's station. It was empty. No notes, no charts, no signs of movement. The screensaver on the computer read, "Welcome." That's it. I tried logging in. The system rejected my password. Tried again. Locked out. I picked up the phone. Deadline. The intercom clicked on for a second, then off. No sound. I started to walk room to room, hoping to find someone. Anyone. Every patient was asleep. Perfectly still. Breathing, but barely. Like they were waiting for something. I opened the supply closet. The shelves were bare, except for one item. A clipboard. My name on it. And a single page. Continue until instructed otherwise. No signature. No logo. Just that line. I told myself it was some weird internal prank, maybe a new employee hazing thing. Hospitals have their quirks, but this didn't feel like a prank. It felt like a loop. Every time I checked the time, it was 12:47 a.m. Every time I tried to step outside, the doors wouldn't budge. Emergency override failed. Stairwell blocked. Elevator stuck between floors. I stood in the lobby and screamed. Nothing echoed. No one came. I slept, I think, on a stretcher in the break room. When I opened my eyes, I was still in uniform. The coffee in the pot hadn't cooled. Still 12:47. I found a mirror. My face was pale, my eyes darker than I remembered. I looked like I hadn't slept in days. But I'd only just arrived, hadn't I? I found Maria again, or something that looked like her. She was standing in room 212, staring at a blank monitor. I asked her what was happening. She smiled. Sometimes you just don't clock out. I backed away. Her reflection in the glass didn't match her movements. It lagged, half a second too slow. That was when I ran. I took the stairs all 5 flights down into the basement. I didn't care what I'd find, I just needed out. But the basement wasn't a basement. It was another floor, rows of beds, empty, white sheets pulled tight, and at the far end a door with no handle. The walls buzzed like bees trapped in concrete. I turned back and there was a woman standing behind me. Not Maria, not a patient. She wore no badge, no shoes, just a hospital gown open at the back. Her mouth didn't move, but I heard her speak. You're working too hard. And then she walked through the wall, not into a door, through it. That was when I collapsed. I woke up in the staff locker room, my badge still on. The clock read 7:03 a.m. Sunlight peeked through the windows. I asked the charge nurse what happened. She looked confused. You've only been gone 15 minutes, she said. You went to refill the supply cart. My cart was full. No one else seemed to notice anything strange. But I knew. I had lived through a night that stretched far beyond 12 hours. Maybe days. Maybe more. I checked the security logs. Nothing abnormal. But in my locker was that clipboard. The same one, same note. Continue until instructed otherwise. I still have it. I've since changed hospitals. I don't do night shifts anymore. But sometimes when I wake up at 12:47 a.m., I wait to see if the minute will pass. It always does now, but the air still feels heavier in those 60 seconds, like something is watching, waiting. I suppose the lesson is this: not every shift ends with a clock out, and not every hospital follows time the way we understand it. So if you ever feel like your shift is dragging on too long, check the time. Twice. If it's the same every time you look, stop moving, take a breath, and remind yourself you're still here. For now. Some stories are loud, but others come in the form of a soft cry behind a closed door in a room no one uses. A baby that was never born. A name embroidered into silence, and a sound that still waits to be heard. Story 6. The baby that wasn't born. There are some sounds you don't forget. The rhythmic beep of a fetal heart monitor. The soft hum of overhead lights in a labor ward at 3 a.m. The distant wail of a newborn that cuts through the silence like a blade. But sometimes you hear something you weren't supposed to. My name is Clara, and in 2018 I transferred to the maternity unit at Banner in Tucson after 3 years in surgical. I wanted a fresh start, a different pace, something warmer than the sharp edges of trauma. I thought labor and delivery would be filled with hope. But hospitals have layers and some go deeper than charts and protocols. My first week was uneventful. Long hours, standard cases, lots of anxious dads and exhausted mothers. But on the 7th night, something changed. I was restocking supply drawers when I heard it. A baby crying, muffled. Not unusual, except every newborn was either with their mother or in the nursery. I glanced at the clock. 2:42 a.m. Quiet hour. Lights dimmed. Security check done. The sound came again. I followed it down the east hallway toward room 312. The room had been empty for years. used for storage, no active patients. The lights inside were off, but the door stood slightly open. I hesitated, then pushed it wider. The air inside was colder than it should have been. The crib in the corner, one of the old metal frame bassinets, was swaying gently, though no one was near it. The crying had stopped. I stepped closer, expecting to find a radio, maybe an old baby monitor, but there was nothing. Just that crib, and a pink blanket folded neatly across the mattress, embroidered with the name Lillian. I backed out and closed the door. The sound didn't return that night, but the next morning I asked an older nurse about room 312. She went quiet, then said softly, "It's best not to ask, just keep it closed." I didn't press her. I thought maybe it was an old loss, a bad memory that staff preferred not to revisit. But the following night it happened again. 2:42 a.m. Same cry, same hallway. I didn't go inside this time. I just stood outside and listened. It wasn't a normal cry. Not hunger, not pain. More like confusion, like a baby waiting for someone who wasn't coming. I checked the system logs. Room 312 had no entries in over 5 years. No badge access, no patient files. But that blanket, that name Lillian stuck with me. I started digging. Quietly. Old incident reports, archived patient lists. In a folder from 1992, I found a birth record. Female infant. Name Lillian Grace Mendoza. Stillborn. The notes were minimal. Full-term complications during labor, unexpected hemorrhage. Mother survived. The baby didn't. Room assigned 312. That night I went back. Not because I wanted to. Because I had to. The door was closed this time. I opened it slowly. The crib wasn't rocking. The blanket was gone. But on the wall, drawn in faint crayon, was a tiny handprint. Just one. I whispered Lillian, and for a moment everything felt very still. Then a soft breath passed behind me, though no one stood there. I didn't sleep after that. The shift ended. I drove home in silence. Windows down, music off. For days, nothing happened. Then one morning, after a long double shift, I returned to the staff room. On my chair was a folded piece of paper, a sketch, crayon, a crib, a smiling baby. The name Lillian scrawled in a child's handwriting. I transferred floors 2 weeks later. Obstetrics, different wing, different rhythm. But some nights when the halls are quiet and the machines hum just right, I think I hear her, waiting, hoping. Still unborn, but not gone. I've told only a handful of people. Most don't know what to say. Some tell me it was stress, hallucination, the mind playing tricks. But deep down, I think they're wrong, or at least incomplete. Some part of Lillian never left. Not because she was angry, not because she was haunting us, but because she never got to be held, never got to be sung to. She was born into silence and stillness, and maybe she waits for someone to notice her, just once. If you ever work in a maternity ward and you hear a soft cry when there should be none, don't panic. Don't run, just pause, listen, and maybe whisper back. Sometimes the only thing a soul needs is to be acknowledged, even if it never drew its first breath. The past isn't always gone. Sometimes it walks the halls and scrubs and smiles. And if you're lucky or unlucky, you might meet a doctor who doesn't show up in any system because he's not supposed to be there anymore. Story 7. The Doctor in the Wrong Era. My name is Neil Carson, and I was a third-year medical student when I started my trauma rotation at Penn Presbyterian in Philadelphia. It was the kind of place that made you feel like you were finally part of something real, fast-paced, high-stakes, and full of stories that got passed around like urban legends. But there was one story no one wanted to talk about. Not directly. They just called him the Old Man in Green. It started with whispers, patients insisting they'd been seen by a doctor who didn't show up in the system. A man with silver hair, kind eyes, and an old-fashioned stethoscope. Always wearing green scrubs, always calm. The patient swore he helped them check their vitals, adjusted their meds, sometimes just sat beside them during the worst of it. But when nurses went to follow up, there was no trace. The monitors hadn't been touched. No doctor had logged in. At first I thought it was just confusion, maybe medication talking. But then it happened to me. It was around 4 a.m., one of those long nights where time stretches thin and everything starts to blur. I was helping in the ICU when one of our patients, a man in his late 60s recovering from a serious accident, suddenly stabilized. His vitals, which had been shaky all night, leveled out perfectly. When I checked on him, he smiled and said, "Tell the old doctor thank you." The one with the mustache. I paused. "Which doctor?" I asked. "The one who came in around midnight. Said I'd be all right." He was humming something. I looked at the chart. No one had checked on him since 10:45. I asked the nurse assigned to him. She shook her head. No one had been in there. The next night, another patient in 5B told the same story. The old doc in green told me I was strong enough to keep going. By the third time I started paying attention, I checked the security footage. Nothing. No one entered or exited those rooms during the times the patients said they'd seen him, but they all described him the same way. Silver hair, green scrubs, gentle voice. It wasn't just in the ICU. One nurse claimed she saw him walk into a supply closet and vanish. Another said she found a note written in old-school cursive on a post-op clipboard with instructions that weren't part of any protocol she recognized, but somehow saved a patient's life. The head of surgery dismissed it all. "People see what they want to see," he said. "Hospitals are full of stress and memory tricks." But then I found the photo. I was deep in the archives looking for case studies from the 1960s. In a framed black and white staff picture from 1963, I saw him. Standing in the second row, arms crossed, faint smile. Dr. Harlan Whitmore, chief of surgery from 1954 to 1965, died in the hospital of a heart attack. They say he passed right in the middle of the OR scalpel, still in hand mid-procedure. The file said he was known for one thing above all, never losing a patient once they mought it to his table. I brought the photo upstairs and showed the ICU staff. Every single person who'd heard about the old man in green went pale. That was him. No doubt. Same eyes, same presence, same slight tilt of the head. Word spread fast, but not publicly. No one wanted it to become a thing. Not in front of administration, but among night staff we knew. If you were lucky enough to be on call when he passed through, you didn't question it. You just let him work. Some called it a blessing, others a glitch in time. I didn't know what to think until he spoke to me. It was 2 weeks before I rotated out. I was sitting in an empty charting room when I heard humming. Low calm, the kind you recognize before you even think. I turned and there he was, in the doorway, smiling, silver hair, no name tag. "You're going to be good," he said. "But remember, patients don't need gods. They need witnesses. Don't forget to stay human." Then he walked away. I chased after him. He turned the corner into the stairwell. I followed, but it was empty. I stood there for a long time, not sure if I'd finally cracked under the pressure. But the next morning on my desk was a folded piece of paper, my name in cursive. Inside was a quote, "Medicine is listening, even when there are no words." I still have it. Still don't know how it got there. But every time I feel overwhelmed, like I'm drowning in data paperwork statistics, I remember his words. I remember his presence. And I look for the quiet room, the one between rounds, where sometimes if the light hits just right, you might see a figure in green passing by, humming something long forgotten. If you ever work late nights in an old hospital and hear about a doctor who doesn't show up on paper, don't be afraid. Some people don't stop working just because their heart stops beating. And if he visits your patient, count it as a gift. A reminder that not all miracles come with proof. Some come with presence. Some boundaries are marked by walls, others by paint. Just a thin red line on the floor. But in this final story, that line is more than a mark, it's a warning. And when it moves, something always follows. Story 8. The red line on the floor. There's a rule in every hospital that isn't written down. A doorway. You don't open a corridor, you don't linger in a phrase, you don't repeat. At Cedars-Sinai, it was a line. A single red stripe, no wider than a thumbprint, painted across the surgical floor between OR4 and the scrub room. I saw it my first week, and like everyone else, I stepped over it without a thought. But that changed. My name is Marissa Tran. I was an operating room technician newly transferred from San Diego, excited to finally work at one of the best hospitals in the country. Cedars had the prestige, the pace, the pressure I craved. But it also had something else. Something I didn't notice until one of the nurses pulled me aside after a night shift. "Don't step on the red line," she said, her voice low, eyes fixed ahead. "Just don't." I laughed at first, thinking it was some old superstition, but her expression didn't change. She wasn't joking. I nodded, pretended to take it seriously, and went back to work. But the line stayed with me. Once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. It was faded in places like it had been scrubbed 1,000 times, but never fully disappeared. Some staff walked around it, some over, but no one stepped directly on it. One day, a new surgical resident, Dr. Harris, walked into OR4 talking loudly, moving fast. He was confident, a little cocky. As he strode past the line, his foot landed dead center. I didn't think much of it, but as the procedure began, the lights above flickered once, then twice. The cauterizer failed. The suction line burst. Within minutes, the room descended into chaos. Instruments slipped from trays. The monitor screens glitched, and then the patient's heart rate flatlined. A healthy 42-year-old man undergoing a routine procedure dead within 10 minutes. No one spoke afterward. The attending blamed equipment failure. The tech team ran diagnostics for hours and found nothing. But when I returned to the hallway, the red line had grown darker, thicker, like it had just been painted. I didn't step over it again. Days passed, weeks. The tension in OR4 grew thick enough to taste. Nurses swapped assignments to avoid it. Surgeries moved elsewhere. But sometimes we had no choice. One night around 1 a.m., I was restocking when I saw movement near the line. A janitor, someone I didn't recognize, stood at the edge, mop in hand. He wasn't cleaning, just staring. His head tilted, eyes blank. I called out, but he didn't respond. Then in one slow step, he placed his foot directly on the red. The lights above us snapped off. Emergency power kicked in 2 seconds later. But he was gone. No footsteps, no sound. Just the echo of wet rubber soles fading into silence. I asked around. No one had seen a janitor on that floor that night. Security reviewed the footage. The camera outside OR4 blinked to static from 12:59 to 1:01. 2 minutes erased. After that, I started noticing things. Whispers that didn't belong. Or equipment beeping without power. A shadow moving along the line only visible through the reflection on metal trays. One scrub nurse told me the line wasn't always there. It appeared after the renovation in 1998. No one knew who painted it. But ever since strange incidents clustered around it, tech failing instruments misplaced patients waking mid-surgery claiming they heard voices. They repainted the floor 3 times. The line always came back. Even when sanded down, it reappeared overnight. No explanation, no permission, just there. Some believed it marked a structural fault. Others said it was where someone had died during construction and the stain never left. One circulating rumor was that it wasn't paint at all, but a chemical trace that only revealed itself under stress. I don't know, but I do know that stepping on it changed things. The ORs on either side felt colder. Procedure time stretched longer. Staff fell into strange silences they couldn't explain. I started avoiding that wing altogether. Then one day, I slipped. In a rush between two rooms, tray in hand, eyes on the monitor ahead, I stepped right onto the line. Everything stopped. My radio hissed with static. The hallway lights dimmed. For a second, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. It felt like hands pressing on my chest, not violently, just enough to remind me I wasn't alone. Then it was over. Lights back. Radio cleared. I kept walking, but I never crossed it again. A week later, the line moved. It shifted 3 feet to the left. No one admitted to painting it. No staff report filed. But we all saw it, and we all knew it meant something had changed. A new boundary. A new warning. The color was darker now, almost crimson. Sometimes late at night, I wonder if the line is alive. Not literally, but something close. A signal, a threshold, a rule that doesn't come from any manual, but from something deeper, older. If you ever work in a hospital long enough, you learn that not all dangers come with alarms. Some are quiet, simple, a red stripe on the floor. And if someone tells you not to step on it, don't. Not because they're superstitious, but because they've seen what happens when others do. Some boundaries aren't meant to be crossed, and some lines draw themselves. Hospitals are supposed to be places of healing, but as you've just heard, healing doesn't always mean peace. Sometimes the most sterile rooms hold the deepest echoes. Sometimes the softest cries belong to those who never got to live. And sometimes the ones who save lives refuse to leave, even after their own hearts have stopped beating. We've just walked together through 8 true scary hospital horror stories, from locked wards and impossible time loops to phantom doctors and lines that no one dares to cross. And if there's one thing these stories have in common, it's this: they don't just scare, they stay. So maybe next time you walk down a hospital hallway and feel a cold draft, or hear something in the vents, or see a door where no door should be, don't dismiss it. Just keep walking. Quietly. Respectfully. Some places aren't haunted because of death, but because of how deeply people wanted to live. Thank you for spending this time with me. If any of these stories reminded you of something or someone you've encountered, share it in the comments. Or don't. Some stories don't want to be told twice. Until next time, stay safe, sleep light, and don't ignore that call light if no one's in the room.